the April 10th, 2023 board business meeting. For the safety of those in attendance, display of signs or banners will not be permitted. If you have a sign or banner, you will be asked to leave it outside the boardroom for the duration of the meeting. Tonight's meeting is a meeting of the board held in public, not a public hearing or discussion with the board. Please be respectful of the presenters, the board, and your fellow audience members as we discuss and deliberate the items on tonight's agenda. Comments or actions that are threatening to or disrespectful of presenters, the board, or others in attendance, including use of foul language or any other behavior that is disruptive of the board meeting, will result in immediate removal from the meeting. Patrons will be invited to share comments as part of the public comment portion of the meeting as outlined in Board Policy BCBI. That time is set aside on the board's agenda for members of the public to share their thoughts. It is not a time for dialogue with or a question and answer session with the board. Patrons who wish to participate in public comment must fill out the public comment form so that the board or staff can follow up with you regarding your public comment as needed. If your comments require follow-up from the board or staff, that will occur after tonight's meeting. The district assumes no responsibility or liability for the information shared during public comment. The views expressed are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Lawrence Public Schools. In addition, USD 497 provides access to our board meetings through live streaming. The platform used for this live streaming has acceptable use rules for content on its site. USD 497 does not delete or hide board meeting videos. However, the streaming platform may elect to do so if the content of public comment or any other portion of the meeting is found to violate the platform's acceptable use rules. Thank you for your cooperation in these areas. At this time, motion to approve the agenda would be in order, and I'll note we have an amended agenda.
I move we amend and approve the agenda for the April 10th, 2023 board meeting to include the updated personnel report.
Erica, I'll second.
This is Carol. I second.
Kimball,
Yes.
Van, Van, Hill,
Yes.
Kadu Blackwood,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Gordon Ross,
Yes.
Jones. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is special recognition. This evening, I'd like to welcome Amy McInerney, principal of Free State High School, to the podium to introduce our honorees.
Good evening. Coach Randy Streeter, our wrestling coach at Free State, could not be with us tonight, so he sends his regrets. But we're going to recognize two of our wrestlers tonight, our two state champions. We'll start with Eric Streeter. Eric is a 4-time state qualifier and a 3-time state placer for Free State High School. Eric completed his high school career with 102 career victories and won the 6A state championship this year at 144 pounds. He is one of only 5 male wrestlers to win a state championship in the history of Free State High School. He's also one of only 6 wrestlers to ever win more than 100 bouts in his career at Free State. He is a 2-time captain of the wrestling team and a member of the National Honor Society. Eric is signed with Lebec Community College and will pursue his education and wrestle in Parsons, Kansas next year. Our other wrestler tonight is Matthew Markham. Matthew ends his career at Free State High School with a career record of 120 and 23. Matthew is a 2-time state champion, a national champion, an All-American, and he recorded a perfect senior season this year with a record of 54-0. Matthew is also Lawrence, Kansas's first national wrestling champion from either high school. No other wrestler in the history of our school has ever captured 2 state titles, an undefeated season, and a national championship. Matthew represented Free State High School and the state of Kansas last month at the NHSCA National Wrestling Championships in Virginia Beach. Matthew went undefeated on the weekend, winning 6 consecutive matches against opponents from New York, Connecticut, North Carolina, Maryland, and New Jersey. In his championship finals match, he beat 3 times North Carolina state champ Caleb Beatty by a score of 6-2. Matthew's undecided where he will attend school next year, but is definitely wrestling at the next level. Both Eric and Matthew started wrestling together in 2010 for Sunflower Kids Wrestling Club here in Lawrence. They have both enjoyed extremely successful careers on the mat, with now Free State head coach and Sunflower Kids Wrestling founder Randy Streeter, who has coached them both since they were just 5 years old. So congratulations to both Eric and Matthew and the entire Free State Wrestling program. You have made us very proud as Firebirds.
I wanted to start off with thanking everybody for coming out here and supporting Free State Athletics. Wrestling means everything to me, and I've been doing it for 12 years now with good friends, and it's made me a better person overall.
Yeah, wrestling has helped me these past 4 years get through high school, and I just appreciate all the support that is given to us through the school board, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I do have a question. Now that you've won the state championship and the national championship, what are you going to do next?
I want to wrestle at the highest level I could possibly wrestle at, but I haven't undecided yet, so yeah.
Any Disney World plans in there? Just kidding. Are your parents here?
Oh, yeah, over there.
Okay, could your parents please stand? Awesome. I think that is a huge accomplishment. I wouldn't even know what to tell, how to begin to wrestle, so, but you've been doing it since you were 5, so that's a huge commitment a huge testament rather to your commitment to the sport, and to have a state and a national champion right here out of Lawrence is truly remarkable and something that we should all be proud of. So congratulations on all of your accomplishments and your future successes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations to both of you, and thank you for being here this evening so we could recognize your outstanding accomplishments. Okay, at this time, Paula, would you like to recognize our retirements this evening, please?
Yes, I would. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. The Board of Education recognizes the following staff member with sincere appreciation for their years of service and devotion to this community and its schools. So we'd like to thank Sherry Murray for her 8 years of service and Laura Wolfock for 6 years of service. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Next is our report of the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Lewis.
Thank you. Good evening, board members, members of the public, those that are watching online. I first of all want to send a hearty thank you to Chef Camille Acorn and her culinary students at the Lawrence College and Career Center for the wonderful spring meal that they served the board and other staff members this past Friday. These students are learning to plan, prepare, they're being educated about various types of food, but most importantly, this gave them an opportunity to cater fine dining meals. I definitely feel very fortunate that we were invited to test and eat their work. That was really delicious. I had a quail deviled egg for the first time ever in my life, thanks to our Lawrence College and Career Center. This meal certainly was delicious. I think it was like a 5 or 8 course meal. Enjoying also getting to hear from them, what was the favorite parts of their, in terms of preparing the meal, and definitely hearing from them about this huge learning experience. We also celebrated during that same day, celebrated 2 students' recent acceptance into the culinary school of Johnson County Community College. And so congratulations to those seniors there, pictured with Chef Acorn. On the left of your screen, seniors Jacob Newman and Declan May. So congratulations to these scholars for being accepted into Johnson County Community College. And that's the quailed deviled egg on the right of your screen there. Very remarkable students. Definitely the staff there at the College and Career Center definitely have something to be proud of in the culinary program. Also want to congratulate Lawrence High students Tanner Booley and Olive Harrington. Their photographs were selected by the Artifact for display in the Real Exposure Competition and Exhibition in New York City in May and June. In addition, two LHS students, Hazel Beeson and Levi Jones, created jewelry and photography pieces that earned first place at the Washburn Art Day. Congratulations to these scholars. Sticking with Lawrence High School, I have several Lawrence High staff honors to celebrate as well. LHS girls basketball coach Jeff Dixon earned the Eddie Ryan Award as the top girls basketball coach in the greater Kansas City area. After being nominated by three of his former students, LHS math teacher and department chair Matt Ellis earned KU's Wolf Teaching Excellence Award and $3,000, as well as LHS will receive $1,000 as part of Matt's recognition. And then finally, LHS Assistant Principal, Athletic Director Matt Gilman passed the required exam to become a certified athletic administrator through the National Interscholastic Administrators Association. Certainly proud of these staff members' accomplishments. During the month of April each year, our friends at the Cans for Community sponsor a 5,000-pound recycling challenge with the proceeds benefiting our schools. So please, I encourage you to recycle your aluminum cans using the blue can houses in various parking lots around town. Linda Klinker and her crew will, from Cans for the Community, will sell the aluminum and present the check to each one of our elementary schools. So going on this week, actually tomorrow, you can receive, first of all, an amazing dinner from Chipotle, but 33% of the proceeds will benefit our Lawrence Education Association, and that's the Chipotle located on 6th Street. This Wednesday, April 12th, from 5 to 7, is the LHS Innovation Expo. Students from a variety of the career tech education classes will be sharing projects that they have been working on over the course of this semester. Visitors will get to see student work from the field of arts and media, culinary, engineering, pre-med, plant and animal science, and computer programming, along with many, many more. The event will be catered by the LHS culinary class. This event is free and open to the entire community, so please make plans to stop by and support these amazing LHS CTE students. They also have a commercial that I hope will play. Yes, get some
Next
sound on that.
Wednesday, April 12th, from 5 to 7 p.m., the very first Innovation Expo will be held at Lawrence High. Career tech ed teachers and students have been working hard preparing for it.
My accounting class, my Accounting 2 class, they are preparing display boards to educate the public about financial ethics. My Drafting 2 class, they are designing and printing a 3D object to show off.
This past week, we all settled on a menu, everything that they would be making for Innovations Night. And then next week, all week long, we're going to be cooking during class period leading up to Innovations Night. And that evening, I will have students come in and they will finish the prep work and finalize our dishes and plate them and present them to everyone.
Okay, so we're going to have an animal interaction experience where people will be able to see our rabbits that we have been raising and some chickens we've hatched out from eggs. We'll have plants there that we've grown in our greenhouse here at the school or that we've brought in from a nursery and transplanted and prepped for our sale. So people will be able to actually buy the plants that we have put a lot of effort into.
We just finished building lung models, so we built healthy models of lungs, diseased lung models, which we're going to showcase. Kids are going to be measuring blood pressures for people coming in, so it's hands-on, a little more.
Yeah, so in the Innovation Exposition, my students will be doing some live work. So I'll have a student who will be doing live digital drawing, a student who will be doing live painting, and a student will be doing live charcoal work. So we'll have digital traditional charcoal and traditional paint being done, as well as displaying the students' work that they've done in the various classes.
On April 12th, I'm going to be doing a live charcoal drawing, and I'm really excited and stoked about it, and very curious what I want to draw, because I have no ideas yet.
I have 3 pieces that are going to be put in. One of them is a layered portrait. 2 of them are portraits, and then this one, if I finish it. And I've never been a part of an art show before, so I'm very excited about it.
I'm working on an animation for the Innovation Expo, specifically to just kind of announce it. I'm trying to just show different things that they do in the Innovation Expo. Like I have a camera, I have painting, stuff like that.
Be sure to come out to the Innovation Expo next Wednesday to support the hard work done by teachers and students. For more information, check out the posters or talk to a CTE teacher. This has been Sydney, Ivy, and Jordan reporting for the Lions Roar.
So that video was made by our scholars, edited, produced, and everything by our scholars. And the animation that you saw Anna working on in that video is actually finished, and it's about 30 seconds. I thought it was amazing. In our district. So super excited about that. And this is the last slide. The Lawrence College and Career Center will present its Girls in Tech Conference on April 27th with participation from both middle and high school girls and non-binary students. Sarah Mahoney, who is our computer science and business education teacher, certainly does a great job of bringing these challenging and relevant experiences to our scholars. Bert, you may have heard this. Bert Nash began a phased opening of the Treatment and Recovery Center of Douglas County today at 1000 West 2nd Street. Urgent care community check-ins are accepted from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. weekdays and noon to 4 on weekends at the front entrance. The center serves all Douglas County residents, including children, with immediate access to behavioral health crisis assessment and treatment. After hours, any individuals experiencing a mental health crisis may come to the entrance of the west side of the building to be seen by the center staff. Also want to also have some important information as it relates to reminders to our school families. First, new student registration is now open. So please go to our website at your convenience and click on the new student registration link to register your kindergartner or your new student for this upcoming school year. And we're also asking families of all returning students to please check your email for information about our annual student registration. Please complete this short online registration form by the end of the month to help us with staffing and planning to meet students' needs next year. Families can update their contact information, emergency contacts, and their students' health history. They will review annual parent notices and provide the required permissions that we need here in the district. This process should only take about a few minutes of your time. So we're asking all families of all returning students, please complete this annual student registration for returning students by April 30th. And then finally, this is a reminder that there is no school for all students on Friday and Monday. Friday is a planning day for our staff, and Monday is our designated inclement weather makeup day, which we did not use this year. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Next is the report of the President of the Board. I have a few things to share this evening. I first want to say good evening and welcome to all of our members of the public who are here this evening. Thank you for joining us here and also online. Wanted to just share that I was very proud to represent our district this last week in receiving a national award for our College and Career Academy program, which is housed at our College and Career Academy. Dr. Bill DeWitt is our leader of that program at the building and has put together a fantastic program that is supporting our students, and it was an honor to be able to recognize that work on a national level. Also, this past week, we had a Facilities Planning Committee meeting. GR is going to share more about what we talked about at our Facilities Planning meeting. And then finally, wanted to share my thanks to Chef Eichhorn and the culinary students at the College and Career Center for the amazing spring formal lunch. They really hit it out of the park. It was really wonderful. The last thing I want to share, and there's quite a bit going on, but I wanted to give the board a brief as brief as I can make it, update on the developments in the legislative session over the last week. It was a bit of a zoo. The legislative session reached first adjournment at the end of the week, last week. This essentially means that the regular session is complete and that legislators are returning home to their districts for a 2-week break. The veto session, or the wrap-up session, begins on April 24th, where there will be several days where the House and Senate will consider veto overrides and also wrapping up any lingering items, of which there's some really important ones to K-12 public education. First off, the legislature approved a tax bill, Senate Bill 169. It imposes an incredibly regressive flat tax and further reduces corporate income taxes in the state of Kansas. It passed both chambers. It's going to the governor. The concerns about this one have to do with the fact that it's going to reduce substantially state revenue year over year, and there's concerns that it will therefore impact spending on public education and other programs that make up a large portion of the state's general fund obligations. So that's one to keep watching. I think the next thing I want to talk about are, there's a whole set of bills that was passed, and one where they overrode the governor's veto, that impacts transgender students across the state and in our district. Unfortunately, the legislature overrode Governor Kelly's veto of the anti-transgender student athlete bill. Interestingly, the Biden administration, through the Department of Education, is advising school districts across the country that blanket bans on allowing transgender athletes to participate in sports in alignment with their gender identity would be a violation of Title IX. The Department of Education rule would give school districts some flexibility in addressing the concerns related to transgender students. There were also a number of other bills regarding barring transgender individuals from using the bathroom that aligns with their gender identity, and also criminalizing gender-affirming care. I just want to express personally that I support our students in our district, our transgender students. I see you. These policies are hateful and harmful. And I want to remind the board and our community that our district has adopted an equity policy that defines marginalized identities to include transgender students, people from LGBTQ communities, along with many others, and that we have made a commitment through that policy to ensure that all of our students are engaged in positive and academically rigorous environments where equity is woven into what we do. In addition, we have a board policy, JGEC, which prohibits discrimination and harassment of students on the basis of a number of factors, including sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. And to just reassure our students and our staff that we take our obligations to provide equal opportunities to our students very seriously, and will continue to do so. Finally, there were a number of developments in the K-12 policy and funding area. Unfortunately, there's nothing that's been decided. The House sub for Senate Bill 83, which was the big voucher bill, died in the Senate, and that's the one that would have given, that would have taken a lot of money out of the public education system, given it out in vouchers to be used in completely unaccountable education settings. It didn't pass the Senate. Legislative leadership has said that even though it didn't pass the Senate and a motion to reconsider failed, so it should be dead, they're planning to try to revive the contents of this bill in the veto session in some form or fashion, which could look like, you know, throwing it in a conference committee on some other bill. So those are issues to continue watching. The legislature did not do its work, or didn't finish its homework in funding K through 12 education for the state. They did not pass an appropriations bill for K-12 funding, even though we make up 50% more or less of the state spending. They've saved the entirety of their work on that for the veto session, which is concerning. There is a bill, House sub for Senate Bill 113, which is alive and will be considered during the veto session. Most concerning, extremely concerning, is that this bill includes language that would violate the Gannon settlement by removing the annual increases that are in the state finance formula for base state aid per pupil. What that means practically is that that for the not 23-24 school year, but for the 24-25 school year, if this were to become law, our district would lose approximately $4.1 million in funding that we would be slated to get under the current school finance formula. It's really disheartening to see the legislature considering that kind of policy, given everything else that we know about what education funding has looked like in our state over the last many years. In addition, they took out all of the proposed increases out of the governor's budget for special education, which we know they are illegally underfunding and have been for the better part of the last decade. They also removed funding for the high-density weighting, which is something that our district benefits from. That would be about an $800,000 hit to our district if that funding is not put back into the bill. Unfortunately, this bill, in addition to dealing with the appropriations piece, includes a whole host of other policy issues, that some of which did not even get hearings because they were placed into this bill it became a Franken bill, really. Expands the tuition tax credit program, which is another form of school voucher. Requires districts to create a parent portal, which sounds nice, but when you read the details about what that actually means and what impact it would have on our teachers, it is my opinion that it would effectively prevent teachers from effectively differentiating instruction for students during the school year, because they would be required to post any material, assessment, anything that they plan to use with a student in advance of the school year. It's not good practice, it's not good pedagogy. And then finally, that bill would also require districts to allow non-public school students to participate in any activity that we offer that's a CASHA-sponsored activity without providing any funding to districts to support the staff that would be needed to facilitate the participation of those additional students. I'm sure there's a bunch of other things in there that I have not listed. Needless to say, there's a lot of work to do still in this area, advocacy work to do, and I encourage board members in our community to keep an eye on all of these bills and make sure that your voices are heard. I also want to thank publicly our legislative delegation from Lawrence. They have been supporting our needs with their votes, and oftentimes that kind of support doesn't get thanked enough, so I just want to publicly thank them for standing up for our students and our staff. And finally, at a previous meeting, I had mentioned that the board was planning a retreat this month. We've decided to postpone that. We have some scheduling conflicts that have arisen that are just making it difficult to move forward with that, so we will reassess and provide additional information about that in the future. All right, I know that was a lot. Thank you for your patience. At this time, we have public comment. We do have 3 individuals who are signed up for general public commentary, and then we have 6 individuals who have commentary related to the boundary item that's later on the agenda. So if a board member would please read the public commentary policy. Thank you.
The 497 Board of Education welcomes public comments and thanks you for taking the time to talk to us about our policies and procedures. We set aside this time during our regular meetings to hear from the public. Patrons who wish to participate in public comment must fill out the public comment form so that district staff or the board can follow up with you regarding your public comment as necessary. This is your time to share your opinions. However, public comment is not the appropriate forum for making complaints about specific staff or students. If needed, the board president or presiding officer of the meeting may direct that a patron's comment be heard by the board in executive session in order to protect the privacy of the individuals to be discussed. Before participating in public comment to share a complaint, the board requests that public commenters follow the complaint procedures set out in board and district policy as appropriate. If you need assistance in these processes, please let the board clerk or other district staff know. The board president will invite comment on topics not included on the agenda at the beginning of each meeting. Comments related to agenda items are welcome after the board has had the opportunity to discuss the topic. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. The district assumes no responsibility and/or liability for the information shared during public commentary. The views expressed are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Lawrence Public Schools.
Thank you, GR. At this time, I would invite Michelle Eagleman to the podium. You'll have 3 minutes. Our board clerk will be providing you with the timer.
Good evening, board members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on a topic that I care about and I think you care about too, and that's the treatment of children. I'm passing out some pictures right now of our 4 children. I bet some of you have some very similar pictures yourselves, and you're probably wondering why. I can't speak for dads, but I know that when my children were babies, I could gaze at their faces for hours. There's something almost mesmerizing about babies. It's like there's a magnetic attraction between a baby's eyes and your own. It's hard to look away. It's nothing to do with their beauty, though babies are beautiful, or what they're doing. They're not doing anything phenomenal. So why is it? What quality is it that attracts and holds our attention like that? The more I think about it, the more convinced I am that what we're seeing is the quality of innocence. We're seeing what innocence looks like. Why am I saying this? I see what is going on in our schools as an effort to destroy the innocence of children. Children are exposed to unwholesome images, their bodies talked about in judgmental ways, their young minds confused about their gender, all in the name of education. It isn't education, and it isn't even indoctrination as far as I'm concerned. It goes much deeper. It's an effort to destroy their innocence through the sexualization of children. This may not be intentional, yet it is happening through books in the library, sex ed classes at young ages, as well as conversations about gender. Why does this matter? History gives us some insight into why it matters. In the book of Genesis, God created man and called him very good. Man and woman were innocent, but there was another creature in the Garden of Eden, the serpent. What did that serpent desire to do? He wanted to destroy their innocence any way he could, and he succeeded. The look of innocence in a baby is the way I imagine God sees us through the blood of Christ, totally innocent again, something we could never manage to do on our own. Jesus not only came to save us, but he called down punishment on those who would hurt a child. He says, "But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and that he were drowned in the depths of the sea." I want to encourage you, all of you, to remember what innocence looks like. What's the difference between Satan causing an innocent creature to stumble or a teacher, administrator, or board member today? C.S. Lewis, back in the 1940s, was chided for using the word damned nonsense on a radio broadcast, but he defended himself. He said he did not use that word flippantly, he meant it. The sexualization of children in our schools is damned nonsense. It's not education. It's not indoctrination. This is destruction, and it is evil, and we need to stop it immediately. Thank you.
All right, next we'll have Michelle Salmons.
Okay. All right. Hello, my name's Michelle Salmons. I'm completing my 9th year with the district. 8 of those have been at Free State High School, where I taught art and graphic design and served as the CTE department chair and redesign co-pilot. This year I've moved back to elementary art, and I'm doing so at Sunset Hill. I've had the privilege of working with top-notch teachers, attending numerous conferences and leadership training. I've made meaningful relationships with students, colleagues, and administrators. The best support I have received over the last decade is from the teachers that I work with. Teachers can only do this job with the help of other teachers. I stand here tonight disappointed, frustrated, and exhausted. Every week I hear more colleagues leaving the district or the profession. I listen to them as they scan job openings, compare salaries, and weigh what is best for their families. I don't blame one single one for choosing to leave. My connections to this district are diminishing. We have been looking at the most efficient ways to do things. We need to now zero in on ensuring teachers can be as effective as possible. The narrative of eliminating positions to provide a competitive salary for staff is harmful. Teachers certainly didn't make this financial mess. However, they are and will be dealing with the brunt. What will the raise mean when teachers have more to do with less? What do teachers need in addition to the raise? Smaller class sizes. We know our decisions are doing the opposite. Time. We create more time when we have fully staffed schools. Like millions of people, I suffer from a mental health disorder. There are times my world gets very dark, and in those times I lose hope. I know very personally what depression looks like. I'm telling you this so you understand when I'm coming to you, where I'm coming from, when I tell you that our district is depressed. Many teachers, staff, parents, and community members have lost hope. Ask our district administrative leaders to take the data you will later hear tonight, diagnose the problem, create a treatment plan, and multiple supports in place to lead us back to wellness. Ask teachers what they need and actively listen when they respond. We are tired of performative measures. What will help teachers will directly benefit students. Plan time, collab time equals student feedback and intervention. Now is the time to put all effort into retaining our highly qualified teachers and recruit ones in place for those who are leaving. We have a master agreement that guides best practices. We are seeing the plans for next year, manipulating the words in our contract. District administrative leaders are cherry-picking the information they are providing us. One of the most significant staff-employee relationships we have is at the negotiations table. Take advantage of that. We know that teachers matter more to student achievement than any other aspect of schooling. Research from American Economic Review suggests that among school-related factors, teachers matter most. What is best for teachers is best for students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and finally, Topher?
President of Archaeological Indifference, Vice President of Truth, Secretary of Statistics, Minister of Celebrity Injustice, Chief in Staff and Serpent, Blessed Page Turner of the great book of misdeeds and overestimations, Baron of the great climate war, Minister of the deteriorating skies, Baron of epic boredom and overindulgence, all gathered notables. Good evening. I am the young man full of strength and hope, tangled in that ancient endless chain of profit, power, gain, of grab the land, of grab the gold, of grab the ways of satisfying need, of work the men, of take the pay, of owning everything for one's own greed. Yet I'm the one who dreamt our basic dream in the old world while still a serf of kings, who dreamt a dream so strong, so brave, so true, that even yet its mighty daring sings in every brick and stone, in every furrowed turn that's made America the land it has become. For all the dreams we've dreamed, and all the songs we've sung, and all the hopes we've held, and all the flags we've hung, the millions who have nothing for our pay, except the dream that's almost dead today. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet and yet must be, the land where every child is free, the land that's mine, the poor man's, the Indians, Negroes, children's, we who made America, whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain must bring back our mighty dream again. Sure, call me any ugly name you choose. The steel of freedom does not stain. From those who live like leeches on our children's lives, we must take back our land again. America, I say it plain, America never was America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be. Out of the rack and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot of graft and stealth and lies, we the people must redeem. The mountains and the endless plains, all the stretch of these great green earths, and make America again.
Thank you. That concludes our public commentary, our general public commentary this evening. Next is board commentary.
I just have a couple things. So over the last couple weeks since our last meeting, want to congratulate Dr. DeWitt on his award. Great program, all the work that he's done, and had a chance to talk to him about that and the work that he's doing over there. Also, you know, I know I've shared a couple stories from this spot of the lessons that I've learned from my kids and the things that they've taught me. And I'll just mention, if you look real close, you might notice that it may look like I've been crying or that I came from a party or something. It's because I was cutting up a tree in my yard over the weekend, and my son asked me if I wanted gloves, and I told him gloves are lame. And then we proceeded to cut down a tree that was covered in poison ivy. And then I got poison ivy all over my face, and my son has not let me forget it since. So it's a good parenting weekend for me. Over the weekend, went to see Oliver at Billy Mills. It's a fantastic performance, and then so that was great. And then as far as facilities go, we're lots of updates. Let's see, Holcomb property. I'll give some highlights. Holcomb, we have a deadline for bids is the 24th. A lot of interested parties, so we're hoping to be able to get a competitive bid for that. We talked a little bit about the very high level plan for the East Heights property and a timeline when we move those programs out of East Heights and potentially over to Pinckney. We talked about a plan, still looking at vehicle update. F&O was going to talk to Enterprise because we're still having a hard time buying vehicles, and so we're going to look at a plan to lease, at least in the short term, because that seems to be a better financial opportunity. Got an update on ESSER funds. The OAF over at Free State, that was moving along. And then they, part of the issue with the OAF and what kind of led it to the decay and the rot was really how it was originally designed and built. And because the press box was designed and built at the same time in the same manner by the same construction company, they have actually started to investigate behind the walls in the press box and found some of the same problems. So we're looking at what repair work we're going to have to do in the press box as well. Got an update on fiber. About 90% of the conduit is done, and we're going to start pulling fiber in about 2 weeks and connecting to buildings. Once that's done, we'll start looking at moving to the LTE phase and what that's gonna look like with the scope and a purpose. And then the middle school and high school devices hopefully will be here in about 30 days or so. And then lastly, we did get an update. We spent a good amount of time talking to Alan Langford from Langford Consulting just about an update from solar. Certainly don't want to turn this into teach the board about solar, but you know, I think in the end, we think, talking to Shannon and I and the facilities committee, we kind of want to probably schedule a work session to really dig into it, but just kind of on a high level. You know, we looked at you know, some of the pros and cons, and just to kind of give everybody kind of where we sat. You know, we kind of ran some numbers with Deerfield just as an example, because it's got a fairly flat roof. It takes sun all year round. There's no trees. We looked at a potential system there, and with the limitations in the state of Kansas on something called net metering, and with 150 kilowatts in net metering, and basically to try to explain that in very simple terms, net metering at 150 kilowatts is how much energy you can produce to put back on the grid before before Evergy will then not allow you to get it back at a one-to-one cost. They'll charge you wholesale, and it becomes less efficient and less cost-effective. So designing a system, it's a balancing act. And so you try to look to build a system that covers about 50 to 60% of the output of any given space that you're trying to cover. And looking at all the buildings across the district, some buildings would be really good for solar and some won't be. And they just won't be because their roof space either has too many things on it, it's covered in shade, or we'd have to factor in the cost of the roof itself would need repair work or need work done to it within the next, would need work or repair done inside of what the ROI of the system would be. So if the ROI of the system is, say, 8 years, and it looks like we'll have to do a replacement within 4 years, it doesn't make a lot of sense to put solar on a roof that we then have to factor in a cost to take it all off the roof, to replace the roof, to put it back on. So we talked about all those things, but all of that, we go in more detail. We plan to do a work session to really dig into some of that. So that's what we talked about.
Thank you, GR. Other board members? Kelly?
I wanted to give, I asked Elise to send board members a update on Fringe and Benefits Committee's report, so I think most of you have seen that, but one update I wanted to provide today and just some context for folks listening. This is our second year using Blue Cross Blue Shield after we were in the market, after going back to the marketplace and previously using Aetna. When we went to Blue Cross Blue Shield, it had a rate cap for 2 years of 6%. Had we not had that rate cap in place, which was an important component of our ability to have a healthy budget this year, we would have seen a 30% increase in our expense to the district. It has to do with the large rate of increases of we had 91 large claims. And additionally, we're watching the cost of some medications, which of course we want our staff to have access to, but that resulted in a significant increase. So when that cap goes away next year, and what that means, bottom line, is that we will, and if I say this incorrectly, please let me know. Megan Epperson is here and who's helping guide that brilliantly, as you might predict. $300,000 is the cost to the district, correct, additionally. One thing that we want to think about as a board moving forward is that next year when that cap goes away, if there continues to be a 30% increase in claims, we could be looking at something in the multi-million-dollar range for costs to our district. Let me just say this clearly, multi-million seems like quite a bit. So between $1 and $3 million, is that about the right range, Kathy? A little over 3 possibly. So that's something that we have to be looking for next year and planning for. Certainly we want our employees to be able to continue to use Blue Cross Blue Shield, which we have just moved into, so we'll be working to with our consultants to make sure that we can keep that price down as much as possible. So I wanted you all to know that. And that committee is one that Kay also serves on too. So then Paula and I were doing work with the negotiations team over the last couple weeks, and I just wanted to put on everyone's radar that PAL CWA will start negotiating with us using traditional base bargaining sometime, I believe, in the end of April. Is that correct, Kevin? Or toward the beginning of May. So we've just started that. There hasn't been a letter exchange, and I look forward to working with PAL and hopefully being able to incorporate some of the matrix changes that they're hoping to see implemented this year. And additionally, my hope that the board is able to provide them a wage increase this year. Along those lines, the LEA has been meeting in the IBB process, and in our last meeting, I wanted to bring to everyone's attention that there was consensus that we would like to see horizontal movement included in the what the salary package looks like for this year. Additionally, we're hopeful, as you've seen in the last couple of meetings, I know several of you were watching, that we minimally are able to make up the vertical movement we've lost in addition to vertical movement for this year, and hoping to also do some work on the salary matrix there. Important to notice that the language around the middle school schedule was a very significant conversation at the table, and we are the district is meeting with PAL CWA and middle school teachers to review whether or not we are working within the contract language, particularly in Article 17, if you would like to look that up, to make sure that the changes to the schedule are compliant with the contract. So that is different than what we heard at the meeting and hopefully our last meeting, and hopefully we can come to consensus on that. If not, we'll open up the IBB process around that particular issue. But I'm hopeful that the committee that's going to be meeting can shed some light on that in a way that will allow us to honor that contract language. So those were the updates from the committees I serve on. And then I also, like Shannon, wanted to take a moment to recognize our trans, non-binary, gender nonconforming students and staff and faculty, and express my support for their, what has been a rough couple of weeks or months and even years for them, and particularly with the legislation that's come through Kansas. And I would hope that our district continues to celebrate what they bring to our communities, and that this board stays committed to our equity policy. And to that end, I think I would like to know, as a board member, I would like to have a better education on what the consequences for the district would be. And I appreciated your article and that the Lawrence Journal World was covering that. I think I would like a little more in-depth understanding of what happens if we don't comply with some of the new legislation that is being passed. And that doesn't mean that I'm suggesting we do something contrary. I just want to understand more fully what the consequences are for that so that we can make informed decisions moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Other board members, I want to make sure to check in with Paula and Carol to see if you have any board commentary.
I have one update, Shannon.
Okay, go ahead,
board
Paula.
members.
Thank you.
So this is from the district site council. So we met on April 3rd and we reviewed the KISA improvement process and the role the district site council should play in that process. As a group, we discussed how other districts use their district site councils as part of that KISA process. And based on that and some discussion with the group members, we proposed some changes to the USD 497 district site council membership. So what that would look like, having 2 Board of Education members, 2 students, 3 parents, 5 community members, partners, 4 business and industry, 3 staff, and 2 district administration from district administration. And Kay was also on that meeting. So Kay, if you have anything to add.
Sorry, this is Kay. This is Kay. The only thing that I would add to that is just I really appreciated Patrick, Kelly really kind of leaning into that conversation with us and really kind of focusing on us, what's the purpose of the district site council? One of the purposes is to be able to be those correspondents, those individuals that can go out into their individual communities and help communicate ideals as well as share inquiries. And so I just want to give a thank you to Patrick Kelly and his team for the very engaging conversation. And if we think about engagement that way with the rest of how we do work, I think we're on a good path. So thank you.
Thanks, Kay. That's all that I have on my list. Thanks.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Kay. Additional board commentary.
This is Carol. Yes, I will just make this very brief, but I would like to thank the students at Lawrence High School for allowing me the honor and the privilege to participate in the trans walkout that occurred on March 28th. It was that was a hard day, bad mentally, but yeah, I was it was really empowering for me. There was nothing more powerful in this world than the act of it being in the space of those who live openly, authentically, and felt safe to walk down our streets in support of our trans students. And I'm sorry, but that walk itself, it gave me the power and the purpose to recommit to the struggle for full equality for our trans community. And I'm so glad, I'm honored to be a part of this board that will continue to support our trans community members, because these people are our neighbors, our family, our friends, and colleagues, and they deserve to live with dignity and be treated fairly in every part of life. And nothing is more important than being supported as a trans student and an athlete and as a person than in the school. And so I was honored to celebrate and continue marching along beside our students toward liberation, peace, and equality. And I will just make this very brief, that it's been well established that trans children who have supportive families are much more likely to see positive mental health outcomes. When parents of trans students accept them for who they are, they significantly have lower rates of anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation throughout their lives. And so I am just, I encourage our students to reach out to a trusted adult if they need someone to talk to. And we have a really great board, and and anyone can reach out to me as well. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. At this time, if that concludes board commentary, we are going to take a 5-minute recess. We will return to open session at 3 minutes after 7. Thank you. return from our recess. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are those that are considered routine and are adopted by one motion unless any board member or the superintendent requests that an item be removed, and then those items would be that are removed would be voted on separately. Any items to remove this evening? Okay, then a motion to approve the consent agenda is in order.
I move the Board of Education adopt the items listed on the consent agenda.
This is Kay, I second. Van?
Yes.
Hill? Yes. Kadu Blackwood?
Yes.
Emerson? Yes. Gordon Ross?
Yes.
Jones? Yes. Kimball?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is new business on bond refunding, and I would like to invite Cindy Frick, our Executive Director of Finance, to the podium to introduce this item and our guest.
Good evening. David Arterberry is here with Stiefel Public Finance, and he will talk to us a little bit about an option for refunding some of our bond issues. I do want to mention that as we review this would be potential savings to the bond and interest fund by decreasing our debt payments, so it would not help with our general fund savings or operating cost. David?
Thank you, Cindy, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I think the last time I was in front of the board to talk about a bond issue was back in 2018 when the district was issuing the final series of bonds from its 2017 election. Tonight I'm here to talk about something a little bit different. That last bond issue that you did was to generate money for new projects. What I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about is the possibility of issuing some new bonds tonight, or issuing some new bonds and using the proceeds of those bonds to pay off some older bonds. And hopefully, much like refinancing a home mortgage, hopefully that might result in some savings to the school board. So what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about what that transaction might look like, and then also then kind of go through the steps if you did want to proceed with the refinancing, the steps that you need to take in order to do that. I'm going to go through a lot of numbers here. I'm going to show you a lot of numbers, but I'm just going to try to focus on what I think are the important points. If you want me to go into more depth about any of the other things, please feel free to chime in here. The district right now has a couple of bond issues. Oops. That arrow's not working. Is she? I was trying to click the arrow there. Yeah. Oh, it did work. Oh.
You make it bigger up there.
The district has two outstanding bond issues right now that were issued about 10 years ago that are currently callable, which means you could pay them off right now if you wanted to. The first of those issues is the 2013A bonds. You've got about $27.15 million of those outstanding. The final maturity date is in 2033, and they carry an average interest rate of about 4.1% on them. The next series you've got is the 2014A bonds. They have slightly bigger outstanding balance of about $27.2 million and carry an average rate of about 3.67, 3.68%. So in total, there's about $54 million of bonds that on average carry an interest rate of about 3.9%. If you were to do a bond issue in today's market and use the proceeds from that bond issue to pay off the old bonds, I anticipate that the bond issue would look a little bit like what you see on this page here. And again, there's a lot of numbers, but the total issue size would be approximately $53.2 million. And if you look at the bottom of the page there, the interest rate, I estimate would be about 2.81%. So about a full percentage point lower than the rate on the existing bonds. based on that lower interest rate, I estimate that the amount of savings that you could receive, again, if you were to sell the bonds in today's market, would be about $3.9 million. Now, that's spread out over the remaining life of the bonds. The final maturity on the outstanding bonds is 2034. So basically, you would spread that out over the next, 10 or 11 years and save roughly, about $375,000 per year. And again, as Cindy mentioned, that is a savings and a reduction to your bond and interest fund. Unfortunately, it's not money that you can free up and use for other purposes, but it would represent, savings to taxpayers.
David, just to clarify, that savings to taxpayers shows up in the mill levy that has to be levied in order to fund the bond and interest fund, correct?
Yeah, the bond and interest fund has its complete unique separate levy from all of the other funds, and this would work to reduce the amount that would be needed to be levied in that fund. Yeah.
Thank you.
So are there any questions about the refinancing? Again, it's real similar to refinancing a mortgage. You're going out and borrowing money, doing a new bond issue, and taking the proceeds from that issue and use them to pay off the old bonds. And the key is to whether or not you can, taking into account all of the expenses, pay off that old bond and have the new bonds have a lower overall borrowing cost such that you reduce your total, annual bond payments, total annual debt service.
So when we first issued these two bonds, we had to go to the taxpayers and ask.
Correct.
Why would we not have to go to the taxpayers to do this reissue?
In Kansas, the statutes don't require a refinancing issue to receive voter approval before it's undertaken. And I think the rationale behind that, I don't know. That's been in the laws for at least 3 or 4 decades. But I would suspect that the rationale would be that a refinancing is typically something that's done to create savings and reduce interest costs. So I think maybe the legislature felt that, because there's not an added cost to taxpayers, there's a savings that seeking the voter approval wasn't necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And also add a clarifying question. So the maturity date on those two series of bonds right now is 2033, 2034.
Right.
With the refinance, it would still be, the payoff would still be through 2034-ish?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't extend the length of the bonds at all, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I have a clarifying, it's a question. So my question is when we're looking at refinancing and being able to do some savings, maybe, reduce that interest cost so we're paying more on the principal rather than on the interest, what happens to our, I don't know if we are doing this on a monthly payment or if we're doing this on an annual payment. I'm just kind of curious about what that payment might look like or how that might change if we move forward with this.
Sure. The bond issues are typically structured where they pay interest twice a year. They have semi-annual interest payments and one annual principal payment. And for Lawrence schools, those payment dates, there's an interest payment on March 1 of each year and a principal and interest payment on September 1. And if you look at these schedules, you can see that March and September dates. I know the numbers are small. Okay. What would happen is those payments would be reduced. Each of those semi-annual payments would be reduced. So on that right-hand side here, you can see what that annual difference is in payments. So you can see that it's about $375,000 a year in most years. If you look over to the left of that, there's a column just that's simply titled Savings, where you can see the amount that each 6-month payment would be reduced. And so what should happen then is when you're doing your budget each year, the amount that you would end up levying for property taxes to make the bond payment would be reduced by the aggregate, so the total annual amount would be reduced by what's shown there.
I appreciate that because the conversation of taxpayers would see this in the mill levy, and I was like, okay, so, but what does that mean? Does that mean when I get my bill or that says this is what you owe is going to be less? So I just was trying to figure that out.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The mill levy should be, I don't know what $375,000 is in a mill levy. Unfortunately, it's not a ton, but it's still, over time, it's a meaningful amount of savings to taxpayers, at least in my opinion.
Thank you.
Sure.
Carol and Paula, I want to check in with you online since I can't see you right now to see if you have any questions.
I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you, Shannon.
Okay.
Real quick, the process, if the board wanted to proceed with doing a refinancing, you can see a preliminary calendar of events for the issue. And I've highlighted in yellow sort of the key steps that the board would need to take. The first step is tonight just reviewing the financing plan. If you did want to proceed with the issue, at your board meeting on the 24th, we've got you scheduled to adopt a sale resolution, or sometimes it's called a go-to-market resolution. It's basically a short resolution that would authorize us as the financial advisor, as well as staff and legal counsel to put together all of the documents required to conduct a bond sale, and then go ahead and conduct that bond sale. We would then return to you on the schedule on May 22nd with the results of that sale in hand. And at that time, you would look at adopting a bond resolution that would actually lock in the interest rates that the best bidder had submitted and lock in those savings. And then after that, the transcript, the proceedings for the issue would be sent to the Attorney General in Kansas and approved, and then the issue would close on June 15th. Now, I've got that June 15th date highlighted in yellow, but that's not, you wouldn't meet. That's really a formality. That's something that's all done by telephone. But the two action items that the board would need to take would be on the 24th of April and on the 22nd of May. Between those two dates, we would do things like get a rating on the bonds. We would complete the disclosure document and all of the bidding documents and send them out to potential bidders for the bonds, do due diligence work. All that would lead up to a sale of the bonds occurring sometime probably in the morning or afternoon of May 22nd, so that the results could then be compiled and presented to the board for action that evening. So there's a couple steps you'd have to go through, and a lot of activity between then. One of the things, though, I did want to make sure you are aware of is that sale resolution, what we would ask that you do, and I'll talk a little bit more to staff about this, what a good recommended number is. We're going to ask that you establish a minimum savings target. How much would you, at a bare minimum, like to receive from the sale of the bonds? Because we're going to need to know that when we go into the bond sale on the 22nd. We wouldn't want to, receive bids and think we have a good bid and present it to you that evening, only to have it generate amount of savings that you weren't happy with. So we'll ask you on the 24th to consider a figure of a sort of a minimum savings target. Now, I hope we come back with a number much, much higher than that, but we do sort of need to establish a floor because we don't want to present numbers to you that you wouldn't want to pass a resolution to lock into.
Additional questions for David? Okay.
On that last note, how would you advise us to even start coming up with a range? I mean, because I'm like, okay, but how?
No, that's a really good question. In the municipal bond industry, there are some benchmarks that some issuers will use to determine whether or not it's worth doing a refinancing for savings. One of them is that we will look at the present value of the savings. How much are these savings, since they're spread out over 10 or 11 years, how much are those savings worth to you in today's dollars? So we'll do a present value calculation, and some issuers will say that if those present value savings are equal to 2 to 3% of the amount of bonds that you're refinancing, then it's worth doing. I don't know how they came up with that number, but that's sort of been an industry standard. Right now, your savings, it's actually, on this page, it's that long blue row towards the bottom of the page. The present value savings is about 6.28%. So you're well above that sort of industry benchmark right now. You know, whether or not what you want to set as your own savings, given that these bonds are callable right now, if you wait to do a refinancing and interest rates stay the same, what will happen is the longer you wait, the less those savings will be. So there's kind of an incentive, since those bonds are callable right now, to not set your savings target too high, because you might end up, if you don't save the money now, you might not be able to do a refinancing, or you might end up looking at a lot less savings in the future.
Any other questions or board discussion?
Shannon, this is kind of a follow-up question for you and Dr. Lewis. So kind of giving that information and just kind of, well, would that be something, Dr. Lewis and Shannon, that your team would come back with to provide some guidance to us on the 22nd? Because again, this is really not my expertise, and I would hate it to be us, who are not working with these numbers day in and day out and know the implications, so.
Yeah, we'll work with our finance team to come back with some suggestions. And speaking of our finance team, I want to just take a moment to thank Cindy Frick. I think you've heard me say before that we're looking up under every rock, nook, and cranny, and this is something that Cindy brought forth to us in terms of something to pursue. So, yeah, we can assist the board in developing that number.
And my expectation would be that David's team would be an integral part of that, given their long history of working with the district and understanding understanding the district and our past history. So I think we would be well informed by the time we get to that decision point on the 24th about what that minimum would be recommended to look like.
Nice to know, thanks. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Additional board discussion? If not, there is a motion on this item. Go ahead.
I move the board accept the board refunding analysis as a recommendation of refunding the 2013 and 2014 bonds.
Second.
Hill?
Yes.
Cadu Blackwood?
Yes.
Emerson?
Yes.
Gordon Ross?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Kimball?
Yes.
Van?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on to our reports this evening. Our first report is Effective Employee Report Part 1, Epic and Panorama Data. I will invite Kristen Ryan, our Executive Director of Human Resources, and Megan Epperson, Assistant Director of Human Resources, to introduce the report. Thank you.
All right, good evening. Kristen Ryan, Executive Director of HR, my co-pilot tonight.
Megan Epperson, Assistant Director of HR.
So our goal this evening is to share with you from our effective employee goal, our EPIC and Panorama survey results, give you the feedback from that. It definitely fits into the indicators from Goal 4, effective employees. Revise, number 5, revise and implement a fall and spring climate survey. and staff stay and exit interviews. And then number 2, attract high-quality candidates for all employee groups. And we definitely know in HR and as building leaders and district leaders that very importance of listening to our staff. And our staff is very used to taking surveys, sometimes a little survey fatigue, but we greatly appreciate their input and high participation over the last 2 years in both of these surveys, and we're going to dig into the data on those. So why 2 surveys? This is really important to differentiate between the 2 in terms of EPIC and Panorama. So EPIC is a statewide initiative to retain Kansas educators, and our teachers took this survey in the fall of 21. We had great participation, and so great information to share, and we're going to get into those details. It compares to specific benchmark districts and targets specific recruitment and retention drivers. And Megan's going to talk to you about the districts that we used as our benchmarks. Like I said earlier, it was administered in the fall of 21, and it will be ongoing. And that's thanking all of you for your financial purchase using ESSER funds to continue this statewide initiative. It's going to be very beneficial in terms of the information that we receive. For Panorama, it is different, and it can be seen as our climate and culture survey. It's provided to give a playbook to address areas of concern, and it's given, that information is based on building level on a scaled response, and it's the goal is to give once a semester for staff, families, and students. And so we have that information to share too from first semester. It was given in January for the fall of 22.
Okay, so I'm going to dive into some of the individual data points within EPIC and Panorama. So the first one we're going to look at this evening is the EPIC survey, and I want to underline again that this was launched and then initially surveyed in 2021, and so I think it's really important to contextualize what was happening in fall 2021. The 2021 school year prior to that, we saw lots of tumultuous education decisions and lots of varying ways of teaching. We moved from teaching all remote to teaching hybrid to teaching all in person in 1 year, and then 6 months later our staff took this survey. So I think remembering the impact of the pandemic in light of this data is important to contextualize, but also we're really looking forward to what the data shows moving forward with that in mind. So a little bit of background on the EPIC survey. This was a survey that went out statewide, and we saw over 20,000 educators in the state of Kansas participate at a response rate of 50%. In Lawrence specifically, we saw about 72% participation rate, about 671 certified participants at the time. We did not survey classified staff, but there is more information on that one for this survey round. And then as you'll see, we have some comparisons against not only statewide data, but as well as some benchmark districts that we were able to identify. So we chose these districts based on demographics, based on size, and also based on location. So those districts that we chose were Olathe, Gardner-Edgerton, Topeka, Seaman, Geary County, and Manhattan-Ogden. So in terms of how the survey was actually given out, staff responded to multiple statements using a Likert scale to assess the extent to which they aligned with the area that was presented to them. There was important survey data that was used to analyze future points here that looked at the educator experience, their level of engagement, and their turnover intentions, which those turnover intentions, as well as their interest in staying in the district, helped shape what was designed to be the drivers for Lawrence schools, as well as what they were looking at statewide with other districts. So we'll look at that slide next in terms of the engagement and retention drivers. And then the slide after that we'll look at, we'll dive into the 11 items that they use to develop to measure the overall engagement of each individual teacher. So this slide, it contains the high satisfaction ratings, moderate satisfaction ratings, and low satisfaction for USD 497, again in 2021. And these are specific to the significant drivers that they found by looking at staff who were intending on leaving the district. And so they were looking at what are the things that were scoring low in terms of satisfaction level for staff that were indicating that they were going to leave. And then what were the things that were scoring high for staff that were saying they were going to stay or they were really engaged. So putting all of that data together, there were 34 total statements that staff responded to. Of those 34, 14 of them, the ones that are listed here, are considered significant drivers for engagement, retention, or a combination of engagement and retention. So in 2021, our staff rated that they had a high satisfaction rate with their relationship with their principal and the level of safety they were feeling at school. They indicated they had a moderate satisfaction level with access to necessary resources and the reputation of the district. Excuse me, and then they indicated that they had a low satisfaction level with their current salary and the salary growth potential in the future, just to name a few out of each of those categories. And so again, these are specific to USD 497. If you look at Manhattan Ogden's, they won't have necessarily the same drivers because these were analyzed based on how our staff were responding, based on their turnover intentions and their engagement within the district. And then the last data point for EPIC, and then we do have one more clarifying piece for EPIC moving forward. This includes the engagement index here. So based on, there are a set of 11 statements that staff responded to that were designed to measure their level of engagement. So the statements were such as, I'm proud to work at my school, teaching gives me a feeling of accomplishment, my voice and opinion are valued, etc. Those were then analyzed to view the overall teacher's engagement level. So we can see here in 2021, and at the top it says 2022 retention report because the report was given to us in 2022. So in 2021, we can see that between disengaged and actively disengaged, we have about 61% of our staff fell into that category, while 39% were some level of engaged at that time. Our benchmark districts were scoring at about 44%, so we were scoring about 15 percentage points higher with staff that were disengaged in 2021. The only other piece that we'll add for the EPIC survey, we are really excited to announce that working with Emporia State University and Dr. Brett Church and the EPIC Center, we have added a classified survey that went out March 30th to USD 497 classified staff, and this is part of a statewide initiative to look at retention and retention initiatives for classified staff statewide. So this survey will give us additional ways to break down the data by demographics. We'll be able to look at additional age ranges, that kind of thing. It will also be accessible, or actually it is accessible in multiple languages and device types. We've had 566 folks who were invited to participate. And as of last week, we had 255 so far respond. So we're at just over or just under 50% response rate so far, and we have a couple more weeks to go. So we're really excited to see those results and really excited to see those statewide analysis with both of those pieces in mind.
And I think just we were very intentional with collaborating with PAL, working with directors and rolling that out and being really clear with the communication, and then just having accessible in multiple ways has been, I think, really well done. And because last year we just struggled, worked really hard with those stay and exit surveys. So this is a good step forward, and really appreciate the coaching from Brett Church too to do it right. Yeah. Any questions on EPIC? And then we'll switch to Panorama.
Kelly.
With the classified staff, that's, first of all, that response rate at this point is impressive. So congratulations and thank you to staff for participating. The other thing I wondered about is, I'm assuming you can also break down by category or by, will you be able to tell like what area the classified staff works in? So you'll be able to see what F&O's staff are saying. You'll be able to see what our paraeducators have said, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
With the certified staff, can you break it down by level as well? Elementary and secondary and?
The way that the survey is owned by EPIC, and they didn't give us as much of the breakdown into those. They could tell us how many participated each level, but not necessarily how each one was scoring. But
Okay.
we can definitely work with Dr. Church to get some of that information. They were trying to be mindful of not sharing too much that would break confidentiality or be too identifying.
I was just curious if you had it. I don't necessarily have a reason to get it. I was just curious if you had it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's coming too with that survey, hopefully, is a breakdown by race and ethnicity.
Correct.
That's coming soon. So as we're continuing to look at what we can do as a district to retain all staff, but also looking at our staff of color and recruiting staff of color, that will help us in that regard.
When the survey was initially given, it didn't give us that option to do that breakdown, and so we're really grateful that EPIC has worked with us to accommodate requests and make updates to the survey, and that was one of our first requests, was to start some of those breakdowns.
I have a quick question. In this, the data for classified and certified, is it, sorry,
This is just certified.
certified,
Yep.
sorry.
No.
Head. Is it union and non-union, or what's the breakdown on
Correct.
that?
They actually did include a breakdown of that information. As reported in the 2021 survey, 68% of our staff reported that they did belong to a professional union. Our benchmark districts reported 58%, and our statewide reported 55%.
So I had a question. As you acknowledged, we had a pretty high percentage of teachers indicate a sense of disengagement, and then you mentioned the 11 items that they used out of the survey to measure overall. Are those the same 11 items that are reflected in that next page in the chart where it says low, moderate, or high satisfaction, or are those, just to clarify, are those kind of the overall engagement pieces?
They're separate.
They're
So there were
separate, okay.
11 specific engagement questions, and then there were 34 other questions, I'll label them as, and those 34 were used to analyze the engagement and retention impact. The 11 for the engagement was particular to engagement.
Okay, so that's what I thought. So, but I wanted to make sure I was understanding that right. So my question is, out of those 11 items, do they fall into? Do you get to see? And you don't need to tell me the results, but do you get to see on each of the 11 items, like, is it a particular thing in this district versus in other districts? It's a different thing that is driving that 61% versus the 44% in some of our comparative districts.
Percentage for each question.
And
Yes,
does that,
yeah,
does that
we-
question even make sense?
Yes, so
Okay.
we have the state, our district, and then our benchmark performance in each one of the 11 items.
For those
So,
questions.
Yes, so we do have the ability to drive down to each of those pieces. Now, the one element that does connect here is that the engagement items also influenced what became a driver. So while the engagement is a separate questionnaire, the staff at EPIC used the engagement pieces to see, okay, if our staff is really disengaged, what are the things that they're not engaged with, and is that contributing to a big driver of them leaving the profession or leaving Lawrence?
So then my follow-up question to that is, will we see as a board what you are recommending specifically to that data that you're seeing that we do as next steps? And is that coming tonight? Is that coming in part 2 of this report? Is that coming at a future date? What does that
So
look
we just started that work and showing this information to our building principals and district administration, and recognized quickly we need a lot more time with it. There was excellent conversation. We were in small groups, we were in large groups. We even had some really good conversation from a staff member that was a teacher doing her administrative intern and really could speak to some of these points on the low satisfaction. So we are getting started. We definitely, when we look at these, they will use, Brett will use the words, this is where we need to invest, focus, and leverage, like in terms of where we really need to put our efforts. And this is where the work can be done. And I would just say we are just getting started with this, with the goal that we will retake this survey in fall of '23. And so we have some things that we would be able to see some growth. We are a little bit behind on this one, the transition in HR. But we still are very appreciative to have the data and the support from our staff for taking the survey. So we do think we can make some impact. And hopefully, some of the very hard decisions that we're doing, hopefully, on the low satisfaction, will address some of the salary pieces as well.
Okay. I think that was kind of where I was wondering what the time frame looks like. I think there, for some staff, is a sense of urgency to see us do something about this. So, but I also know that we have to have time to evaluate and implement. So I guess I would just say if there are things that you are seeing that can be more immediate, let us know.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Yeah, and I think the survey validated what we were all hearing around that time. And so I think the board and district have been responding to some of these. So if you notice that first point, district's attention and approach to supporting staff's mental and emotional health. Around that time, as Megan indicated, there was a lot going on, and we brought a calendar to the board around that time to extend Thanksgiving. You remember that?
Yeah.
It's because we were hearing from staff, hey, we're at a breaking point here. And so the salary and future growth, this is something that the board is working on. Ability to request and secure a substitute, that's something we're having conversations about in terms of substitute pay. So I've been hearing some of these, just kind of validate some of the things that we were hearing.
Kristen will also mention this at the end of the presentation, but this also comes at a great time for our buildings as they work on building goals. So admin received this information at the end of March and started delving into it a little bit. And so hopefully we'll have some more time to continue, but this comes at a great time for the pieces that they can control at their building level that they could start incorporating along with writing their own KISA goals.
I want to check in with Paula or Carol. Do you have questions about the EPIC survey piece?
This is Carol. No, thank you.
Okay.
This is Paula. Not a question, just an observation from what I heard from Michelle Salmon's commentary, that it sort of fits in with these significant drivers for engagement. So I appreciate you just bringing that up. And I think that just confirms like the low satisfaction around district's attention and approach to supporting staff's mental and emotional health. I think that was in alignment with what I thought I heard her say in her commentary.
Thank you, Paula. Additional questions or discussion on this piece? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so the other survey that we're going to share is Panorama. And so this was designed to look at fall 2022, so a year after the EPIC was captured. This was actually assessed in January 2023, meant to capture last semester. So this breaks down, and you'll see on the sides that we have two kind of bar graphs that we're looking at to capture staff, which we can reference as classified staff, even though on the sheet it says staff, and then teacher participants. So we had about 201 staff or classified staff participants, 654 teacher participants, for about 855 total participants there for fall 2022. So for each one, we're really excited about using Panorama because for each building, they're able to really dive into each one of these areas. So they can click on the teacher survey under belonging and dive into the individual questions that were answered. They can see how their building was scoring as well as their district was scoring. And then from a district level, we can see the percentile score nationwide. So for example, under belonging, you can see that staff survey is first at a 68% satisfaction rate. The teacher one is second at a 64% satisfaction rate within the questions that had to do with belonging. And so for the teacher one, we're scoring in the 40th to 59th percentile nationwide. And as we dive into that data more, we can really cater that to look at districts that are similar to us in SES. We're able to look at districts who are similar to us in size, even like coast-to-coast locations. So we're really able to see how we are scoring in comparison to a lot of other districts as they are similar to us, or just look at a nationwide lens. I did pop a couple of comparative data points in here. It's important to remember that EPIC and Panorama are assessing very differently, but I thought it was still interesting to look at a really high level how EPIC was scoring versus Panorama and some of these pieces that we could start to try to connect. So for example, under belonging there, you can see that I included relationship with colleagues within the school and how teachers were scoring there, and they indicated that they were highly satisfied with their relationship with their colleagues, which was a contributor and connected to that belonging category. Resources was our lowest scoring category. Both staff and teachers surveyed that this was something that we could improve in. So we were scoring in the 20 to 39th percentile in both of those. EPIC saw about a moderate satisfaction level for those pieces as related to resources and instructional materials. And then there's three more. So we have got school climate. And in all of these, you'll notice that the staff survey, classified staff survey, is scoring higher than the teacher survey. So 60 to 79th percentile or 40 to 59th percentile for school climate. School leadership, we saw some higher numbers, 71% for the classified staff survey and 64% satisfaction level for the teacher survey. In EPIC, we saw a moderate satisfaction level with that principal instructional leadership. And then the staff leadership relationships was one of our highest scoring categories at 78% and 74%, which also correlated with what our staff was saying in the EPIC survey in 2021, where they rated their relationship with their principal at a high satisfaction level.
Any questions on Panorama? Building principals receive this information. The expectation is that it was shared with their building staff. And so when we look at our EPIC data, our Panorama data, like Megan said, in terms of our building goals, and also our KISA process, we're going to be starting year one, so it's very timely getting all of this data both certified and classified and building our next goals for our accreditation cycle. We also are going to meet with LEA and PAL once we have our certified results, but our classified results, and review those and start those next steps of action plans and collaborating with schools on their building goals.
Okay.
So my question is, once you have that opportunity, and again, staff are being able to learn about the results of this, what do you recommend as the steps for staff who want to help with the engagement part with their building leadership on trying to help out or trying to provide suggestions or recommendations or how to improve these areas for their teams?
I think, first off, knowing what those engagement questions are, and really, when we go back to EPIC, looking at those and how do we dissect those as either if it's specific to the school, starting with the building leadership team and looking at that information, but knowing the what is the question that we really scored low in, and how do we start addressing that as a school and as a district, I think, as well.
And something I'm really excited to see in play, Panorama has a specific playbook that's designed to match some of the areas that you're scoring low in, or if you want to continue doing things well at. So for example, if I look at the resource survey and I see that our teachers scored a 31% level on that one, that we can then, based on each question, the Panorama database is set up for us to toggle into specific suggestions for either things to implement or things to be doing with staff to recognize and try to build up those areas. So that's something that we're really excited to get in the hands of our BLT and our buildings to really start putting hands on and not reinventing the wheel, because we recognize that there's a lot on folks' plates already, and we want to really use the things that are data-driven to be supportive in those areas, and we're really excited to see Panorama has that for us.
And so as a staff member, as an employee at a building, would they see this coming around in their natural conversations and their meetings that they're having with their building leadership as they're tackling some of this? So I'm just trying to understand if I'm an employee, what does this look like?
Yeah, and so that's what we're getting ready to build.
Yeah.
In terms of our first meeting with building administrators was just to unveil, this is the information, diving into it. This is where we are. And so we definitely, that will be our next steps in terms of meeting with building leadership, meeting with LEA, meeting with PAL. What are the next steps that we need to do that are going to be, as we've been told, to invest, to focus, and to leverage? And what have we already accomplished, or what do we feel pretty good about that maybe we've taken some steps towards? I mean, yes, the mental health of our educators, that seems to be one that we really need to start talking and unpacking, and that came up naturally as a priority at our admin PD.
Okay, thank you. So it's more of a wait and you'll see. Okay.
We're just not quite there yet, yes.
And we also want to make sure that buildings are given the time to take ownership for the work too, and make sure that the work they're doing is authentic to their building and driven based on the needs of their specific staff too. So we're really looking forward to that summer planning process as well.
Thank you.
And some of our buildings have taken the Panorama data already back to either their building leadership teams or their staff. And to answer your question, I'll give you an example of that is something, and I don't know what it was called that this principal instituted, but it came from the staff. They took the data back and looked at, I think the area had to do something with communication, and a suggestion came through from staff member to do was it Monday morning or something, communication?
Oh, the
But
Monday
anyway,
morning
it was, in
huddle?
response to this data, communication was an issue in that building or an area for growth in that building. And the suggestion came through from a staff member, and the principal instituted that weekly communication mechanism.
I really appreciate you guys digging into that and helping us understand your world a little bit more. Thank you.
So if you, if you take this survey, I understand you take it in the fall, correct?
In the spring.
In the spring, that was my follow-up question, I missed that point, thank you.
Yes, for Panorama, yes.
There will be, I think we were trying to avoid an overlap with Epic and Panorama, so Epic should be wrapping up mid-April, and then we know that Panorama should be rolling out mid-April to late April for the spring data.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for our presenters? Carol and Paula, jump in if you have any questions.
This is Carol. I was Kelly actually took my question. Thank you.
Sorry.
Do you want to speak to family?
I think we're good. Do you have
Okay.
anything else for us?
Nope, that's it.
Okay.
I think
This was part one of a two-part
Yes.
series. Can I give us a preview of what we can expect for part two?
Yeah, so part two, we're going to focus on our retention and recruitment efforts for this year. And then also the 4-day student calendar week will be presented as a part of recruitment and retention as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda is the Boundary Advisory Committee report. Dr. Lewis and Dr. Larry Engelbrick, our Chief Operations Officer.
Call Larry Engelbrick. Thank you, board members. So we're going to take a look at some of the work that our Boundary Advisory Committee has been tackling in presenting this first proposal. And just to remind members of the public, the board will not vote to approve these boundary committees. This is kind of like their first glimpse or their first read, not necessarily their first glimpse. Their first glimpse of it was during the previous meeting when the Boundary Committee work was on the agenda as a written report in terms of transmission. And this will allow the board to have some open discussion around that proposal. So I turn it over to Dr. Engelbrick.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Larry Engelbrick, Chief Operations Officer. I'm here this evening to present materials prepared and submitted by the Boundary Advisory Committee with the support of RSP and Associates. RSP is unable to be here this evening because of prior commitments that they had. This is an extension of the work that they began with our Futures Planning Committee. I will speak a little bit later on a slide about steps that we have tentatively planned between now and the next 2 weeks to give you an idea of course of action we hope to take. Would begin with Board Policy AD, School District Attendance Areas. Students shall attend schools according to the boundaries set by the board. A student shall enroll in the school designated to serve the attendance area in which the parent or legal guardian holds legal residence. The board will review school attendance areas annually and make changes as warranted. The superintendent shall work with the Boundary Advisory Committee to prepare a written report for the board, when necessary, concerning the changing of school attendance areas for the next school year and the reasons for the recommendations. The board will consider the recommendations at the first regular meeting following receipt of the report, but will take no action on the report at that meeting. The board shall act on recommended changes. Should the changes appear to merit a public hearing, one will be scheduled. I would like to do a brief overview of the futures planning process, what has brought us here today, and driven us through the entire school year on this work. As you know, this past several years we have experienced declining enrollment. We've also been faced with facilities that were underutilized. We will use 80% capacity utilization as our baseline for a building where we begin to optimize the utilization of that building. We're also being faced with rising operational costs. You heard some estimates this evening about the potential increase in our healthcare coverage for the next school year. We're also expecting 25% increase in our property and casualty insurance this school year. All of those things take tremendous hits on our budgets. We know that there's a national, a state, and a local shortage of workforces, teachers, and our other staff members, and we know we have funding limitations from the state. We are not able to generate funds outside of those provided for by state statutes. Last summer, the Board of Education hired RSP and Associates to do demographic and housing, facility analysis, and enrollment projections. RSP spent the fall working with our Futures Planning Committee and facilitating those meetings focused on 3 goals. Those goals being to provide competitive wages for our staff, to support the recruitment and retention of high-quality staff in all positions in our school district, to plan for the annual increases in operating costs, our insurance, our utilities, as all of us have experienced over the past few years, the cost of gasoline. It may be surprising how that cost impacts the amount of student transportation we do as a district during the school year. And to replenish our contingency reserve fund. You heard earlier a presentation on our bond issue. Our contingency reserve fund and our balance in that fund directly impacts our ability to lower and to have a better Moody's score and to lower the cost of refinancing or financing new bond issues. These things are all intertwined and work together. During the school year, the Futures Planning Committee began its work in August at the direction and facilitation of RSP. During the school year, there have been 9 committee meetings, a community-wide survey, 2 public input sessions, one at Free State High School and one at Lawrence High School, and presentations to the Board of Education, 3 separate presentations. Again, RSP would have been here this evening, except they did have a conflict. The work with the Facilities Planning Committee was completed in the month of February. It should be noted that a highly considered item by the Futures Planning Committee was community input. They took that input, they took it seriously, and they worked through many different scenarios to make sure that community input was a driving factor. The majority of the members of the Facility Planning Committee, Futures Planning Committee, I apologize, recommended and supported the closing of schools. The Futures Planning Committee actually supported closing 1 to 2 elementary schools and 1 middle school. That among other budget reduction proposals. They submitted that to the superintendent and administration of the school district, and the administration of the school district recommended to the board closing Broken Arrow, Pinckney, and Woodlawn elementary schools and repurposing Liberty Memorial Central Middle School, along with other budget cuts. The board approved notices for public hearings to close Broken Arrow and Pinckney Elementary School and gave the administration direction to use the next year for planning for the repurposing of Liberty Memorial Central Middle School to begin in the year 2024. After hosting public hearings and receiving additional information from the community, the board voted to close Broken Arrow and Pinckney Elementary School at its March 27th meeting. The Boundary Advisory Committee held 4 meetings during the month of February and March with the goal of focusing on the development of boundary changes to accommodate the reassignment of students if Broken Arrow and Pinckney Elementary Schools were closed. The Boundary Advisory Committee shared its written recommendations for boundary changes for the 2023-24 school year with the board on March 27th. We have tentatively set these events. The Boundaries Advisory Committee will meet tentatively on Wednesday, April the 12th, and Wednesday, April the 19th, to review and make recommendations based upon input from the Board of Education this evening. Tomorrow, based on your recommendations and your input, I will begin working with RSP to work through how those scenarios might be incorporated into the scenario of school boundary changes. This evening, we are seeking board input and direction to be able to finalize the boundary changes for the upcoming school year. So that we look at the impact this will have on our students, at Broken Arrow, 223 students will be reassigned to these buildings: Cordley, Langston Hughes, Prairie Park, Schwegler, and Sunflower Elementary Schools. Students at Pinckney Elementary School, 169 would be reassigned to Deerfield and Hillcrest Elementary Schools. Those numbers are all based upon the current proposed boundary changes. Additional student reassignments or transition would include 93 additional students. 13 Cordley students would be reassigned to Hillcrest Elementary. 20 Deerfield students would be reassigned to Sunset Hill Elementary. 30 Deerfield students would be assigned to Woodlawn, and 30 Hillcrest students would be assigned to Quail Run. Bit of the information from RSP in their table format. Recommended concept and projections from the recommended boundary changes. If you look to the bottom line, to the right-hand section of this table, you'll see that we are at, each year, that 85% utilization of the capacity of our remaining schools. Again, that is the baseline that we would like to have for the utilization of schools and efficiencies within those utilizations. 2 schools, New York and Woodlawn's projections will remain below the 75% utilization. Projected class sizes you have here by building, by class level, grade level, projected students to attend each of the schools. Class size is determined by the board-approved staffing ratio. Currently, that is 25 students per class for grades K through 3 and 30 students per class for grades 4 and 5. If we're looking at lowering the student per class ratio, it would be the ratio that we would need to change. Ethnic analysis. Deerfield's racial and ethnic makeup is 5% more diverse next year than its current population. No other school in our district would have a 5% increase or decrease in its diversity. Free and reduced prices, price lunch analysis. No school's low socioeconomic makeup increases or decreases by more than 10%. That 10% is seen at Deerfield. Deerfield will go from 29.7% free and reduced lunch this year to 39.7% next year. And those are based upon projections. I'd like to go back. All of the information in these tables will change. It will change by day, by week, as students enter our district, move between buildings in our district, a number of factors there. If we change the boundaries, that will impact these numbers also. I have a diagram here of, I'm sorry, I skipped a table. This table shows our students impacted by boundary changes. What this allows us to do is look at where the students will be transferring from and to. If you notice there, we will have 15.1% of our elementary students reassigned to different buildings next year under the proposal. That would be 485 students, and they will be redistributed or reassigned to 10 schools. Our next slide is the proposed map. This slide is just an enlargement of that. And the last informational slide comes from options for our families. The administration would like to recommend the grandfathering of current 3rd and 4th grade students and younger brothers and sisters currently attending the same school so that they may choose to stay at their current school or choose to move to the newly assigned school. Grandfathered students choosing to stay at their current school would be encouraged as soon as boundaries are established to complete the transfer request form and get those approved for the coming school year. The district has a current transfer request policy and process that is available for all other families on a space available basis. We would suggest that any family that is interested in changing schools because of the boundary adjustments consider this as a method to remain at the building that they're currently at, or to possibly move to another building. If there are questions, we have individuals here to help with those, or if you have input and direction, we would be glad to accept that at this time.
So I just have a couple things that I'll start with. Serving on the boundary committee, that committee did a lot of work in a very short amount of time, and it was really good work, and it came up with a pretty good proposal when it was in that room with the people that were in that room. But since then, we've gotten some feedback, and so I think for me, in terms of input, one thing I would like to say before I forget, because I promised somebody I would say it just to make sure it's clear. There was a statement that got out there that led to some confusion about the grandfather policy. That it was stated that the grandfather policy applied to incoming 4th and 5th graders with siblings, and that's not the case. It's incoming 4th and 5th graders, and if they have siblings, it applies to the siblings as well. I just want to make that clear because there was some confusion there. But in terms of feedback, to then take back to the committee that I serve on, I think two things for me. One would be the Deerfield area north of I-70 that is proposed to go to Woodlawn. I think that area needs to stay in Deerfield. And then south of K10 and west of 59, right now that's split between two elementary schools. Most of it is Langston Hughes, but there's that little bit going to Sunflower. That little bit going to Sunflower is about 13 students. And there was a lot of feedback, and that's out where I live, so I know a lot of those people. I think anybody south of K10 and west of 59 should all be in the same school. And so I think that yellow band south of 59, south of K10 and west of 59, I think that whole area should be Langston.
Kelly?
I also support retaining the students north of I-70 at Deerfield and not moving them to Woodlawn. I'm interested, I am in conversation with district leadership. It's my understanding that we decided to move the majority of students to Deerfield from Pinckney, in part to retain a neighborhood. But I question when we are pushing capacity to 90%. So speaking for myself as a single board member, I'd ask that the committee reconsider or at least evaluate that point of view and potentially move more Pinckney students into Hillcrest to decrease the capacity at Deerfield. And I'll say on my own street, on my side of the street, the students attend, or when my children were in school, in elementary school, attended Cordley. On the other side, they attended New York, and on the corner, they attended Kennedy Elementary when it was open. And then down the middle of the street, the kids across the street went to Free State High School, and the kids on my side of the street went to Lawrence High School. So I understand, so that's my bias. I'll just name that. I lived in the place in Lawrence where there were the boundaries, and I lived right on them. And my children played really well with the kids from the different schools, and it was a way for us to have, and again, this is my own experience. I'm just naming that bias. I don't know that that'll be the same for other families. But I would like to see the district consider potentially moving more children into Hillcrest because of the capacity issues and because we have a bit more flexibility in terms of attendance at Hillcrest than we do in other spaces. I also want to name that as we're talking about these boundaries, we're talking about people's families, and they're watching us, eager to know where their children are going. This has been an extremely emotional experience for folks. And to the extent possible, I would like to see families retain autonomy of choice whenever possible. So I'm asking for a liberal transfer policy for our families that are experiencing this significant change to their neighborhoods. That might include, but not be limited to, opening up transfers to Woodlawn liberally, in that it is a smaller community, and for some parents and some children, there might be some parity in terms of those communities. And then I guess the other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit about was we saw some requests from the Broken Arrow families around Cordley and the Schwegler division, and I'm not sure that the Boundary Committee can address all of those concerns, but I did want to name them because we've heard them from several families. And then I will, one other observation, and then I will be quiet so my board colleagues can respond. I heard the reasoning related to not expanding New York Elementary's boundaries, and I want to acknowledge that I know some of that comes from that building leadership. However, I do think there is reason to consider expanding the New York boundaries, and that in fact could have a positive impact on the Montessori programming. So I know that the Boundary Committee met 4 times and they had to weigh many different competing values, and I will be eager to hear what their recommendations are and recognize that some of the things I've requested may not finally come through in the ultimate recommendations to the board.
Okay.
I first want to say thank you, Kelly, for your feedback. It was very comprehensive, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. So I had a few comments. One was related to the grandfathering. In addition, as we're considering who to grandfather in, it would be, I think, worth a discussion for the boundary committee to think about grandfathering in students who are currently enrolled into the program. I wasn't sure, so this might be just a follow-up question. How did we choose the third, fourth, and fifth graders, or fourth and fifth graders? So that would be great for them to discuss, because I think of even a second grader, because I had a second grader who made the transfer over from, and again, it's personal experience, from Woodlawn over to Deerfield, and that transition, we made it through, it's fine. But those families who have younger students, this is a concern for them too. So I would hope that we could talk about that. One of the things that's been really weighing heavy was the high traffic on some of our routes, specifically students getting to Deerfield or crossing over the 23rd. Again, you have to think about your boundaries. So I think it would be wise to look at how much would it cost for the district to go ahead and add another bus route to ensure those students can get back safely to and from school. I think it would be our responsibility to investigate that out. Like Kelly, I definitely think families who prefer those smaller capacity schools, and with just what we're looking at tonight, those schools would be Woodlawn Elementary, New York Elementary, Cordley Elementary, and Sunset Hill. So for parents to be able, who are affected by these boundary changes, being able to have choice in their selection. Thank you.
Paula or Carol, if you have anything to share, go ahead and jump in, and if not, I have a couple of things to share.
Okay, this is Carol, and I want to thank everybody for their comments, their input, and I'm looking at, I've studied, we have all read the emails and we've studied these maps, and I just want to echo what Kelly said and Kay, and I would just really like to emphasize that we would like to focus on giving parents a greater choice in where they can send their kids, but at the same time, it saddens me that we are splitting up the students between the Broken Arrow students, because GR and I both live south of town, and ironically, his student, he would be in the Prairie Park district, and I would be in the Sunflower Elementary. So I'm just just hypothesizing here that and I just want to communicate again that we are looking at this very cautiously, and that we are not looking over any details. And thank you.
Shannon, I'm not sure if I would add anything new to the conversation, other than I would be in support of considering GR's suggestion around the areas. And I had it written down, but now I was at my truck. My suggestion would be in support of considering GR's boundary considerations that he pointed out earlier.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Carol. I had a couple of thoughts that I would like for to add to the mix of things for the boundary committee to consider. Some of it is a little bit of a repeat. GR and Kelly both mentioned the Deerfield area that's north of I-70 that's meant to go to Woodlawn under this plan. I want to acknowledge the Boundary Committee's work in thinking through how to increase enrollment at Woodlawn. I don't want that to get lost. I think that's a very important consideration for the district going forward. But I also think that the committee relooking at that decision might be appropriate. And I know that then impacts where those Pinckney kids go. And given the substantial concerns that have been shared and that I've observed personally in terms of how to create a safe, walkable route for that Pinckney neighborhood to Deerfield, I would like for the boundary committee to consider whether that entire area between McDonald Drive and the river, south of I-70, down to the current Hillcrest boundary that's on the proposal, whether it would be possible to move that entire area into Hillcrest rather than putting them into Deerfield. If we're not going to take kids out of Deerfield to go to Woodlawn, then that creates a domino effect. And I think one of the things you could look at would be moving those kids to Hillcrest and or, as Kelly mentioned, consider that New York Hillcrest boundary and whether some of those Pinckney students or current Hillcrest students might end up at New York. I think those are things to consider given the feedback and just the knowledge that we've all had shared with us about some of the challenges related to the current map. I do want to thank the Boundary Committee for their work. This is really hard work to try to figure out how to make all these moving parts work together. And they really did a lot of work in a short amount of time. I want to make sure I don't lose anything here. I want to address, or at least provide some input to the committee in regard to the capacity conversation. It's come up a lot in messages to the board. GR mentioned it, you mentioned it, Dr. Engelbrick, in terms of what we are looking for, that kind of 80% minimum. When we start seeing our buildings get to 90% capacity, it makes us a little bit nervous. Given that we know that financially we need to be looking at having the buildings that we are using serve more students, my suggestion for consideration would be that instead of shying away from filling up a building, we consider how we plan for the future, the short term and the long term, to expand those buildings that still have capacities under 400 or 450 students. And I think that is one way to allay some of the community's concerns when they see these out years in some of these projections where you've got buildings that are upwards of 90%, like Cordley and Schwegler, for instance, and then Langston Hughes. Perhaps we are going to have to do some targeted additions to buildings to grow them, and I think that needs to be at least in the back of the minds of our Boundary Committee as they are putting all of these moving pieces together. And then the final thing I wanted to mention, and this relates to some of the feedback we've received, but then also Kay's comment about high traffic areas, just because I wanted to think about what does our district look like as a whole. I was looking at the existing boundary map. And if I'm reading this correctly, it appears to me that every single one of our elementary buildings, with perhaps the exception of New York, and it's a little bit hard to tell because this existing boundary map is not updated to show the boundaries for Kennedy, for the Kennedy closure. But if you look at every single one of our elementary buildings, all of them save one have boundaries that cross either 6th Street, 15th Street, 19th Street, 23rd Street, 31st Street, Wakarusa, Iowa, Massachusetts, Highway 59, and I-70. So I want us to be mindful of safety for students, but I also don't want to leave a false impression that our current state does not include boundaries for elementary schools that cross all of those very busy streets. Some of our schools have boundaries that cross more than one of those busy streets. And so I think we have to balance those considerations in terms of being able to operate our district in a way that meets our needs and also ensuring that we have boundaries that we're working with our partners like the city to address some of the concerns that come up with some of those boundaries. So that is what I wanted to add to the considerations in the conversation. Additional thoughts? Erica?
My apologies if we've already addressed this, but we have received a few emails from family members in the community that live south of K10 and west of Highway 59. I know we're talking about elementary school boundaries, but some of those considerations for middle school where those students would still be going out to East Side. And so just some considerations and direction for those families.
Kelly?
I just want to build a little bit on, I think it's Shannon's comment about, again, that conversation around moving potentially more children into Hillcrest instead of Pinckney. The other thing that does, because we also heard from, not just from the folks north of I-70, but we also heard from folks that we were going to move children out of Deerfield and into other neighboring schools, and a request to be able to stay in their home school if possible. It does seem, I'm requesting the Boundary Committee review this. It does seem possible that if we move more children into Hillcrest, we could potentially retain the students that are in Deerfield, could continue to stay there, but that might not be the case. So it would just be an ask to GR and Erica to see if we're able to reduce the number of students that are not in the schools that close that are impacted by this decision of the board. And then just thinking about what Shannon said about our lower enrollment schools, one challenge I would put forward to the district around this, and a request that we heard from those buildings, in particular Woodlawn, is to look at programming that could be enhanced there in terms of utilizing the building more fully, what programming might be added or part of that building, and then potentially building out that school as a with JCs or the building leaderships and communities' input around how to build a community school there or the like that would serve that community well, and then also potentially utilize that space better.
One real quick thing, Kay, and then I think it's really important to note along those lines, for those families who've talked with us about transfer policies, we do have currently our transfer policy at the elementary school is quite open. Like basically, if you want to go to a different elementary school and there's room at that grade level, without us having to hire an additional teacher and class size considerations, your transfer should be approved in most circumstances. So that's something that I hope we can take this as an opportunity to better inform our community about what we already do at that level. I know that it's a little bit different at the middle and high school levels, but at least as to elementary schools. So, for example, if there are families who are interested in transferring to Woodlawn, that would be allowable under our current policy, with the consideration being looking at that grade level enrollment and class size. So, okay, Kay, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, no, it's all right. Just as, the other thing on that, just if
I
a
can just
student.
barely hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
The other thing on that, just to, so people don't get the wrong impression, if a student is accepted into transfer, doesn't mean that they also get the transportation, bus and transportation
they
to go there. So I definitely want to make sure that families are very aware of that.
Right.
And then I just wanted to, so Kelly, you talked about expanding program, and then Shannon, you talked a little bit about expanding, and did you, so about the Woodlawn and those small enrollment schools, and so were you also referring to programming? Just, I don't want anyone
No,
to
actually,
run with
I'm
that.
referring to building capacity. So if you look at that was the intention of my comment. So if you look at the slide, right after the slide that says BAC recommendation draft, I think it's one more, this one, yeah. And that column, capacity, where the red numbers are, that first column. So what I'm looking at specifically is knowing that in terms of funding and being able to fully staff buildings, our capacity at a building needs to be above 450 and ideally somewhere between 500 and 600. So we have, Cordley is still below 400, and that's if it was enrolled at 100% capacity, right? So we've talked about it's really hard to run a building at 100% capacity. So somewhere less than 375 students would be probably the max enrollment at Cordley. Hillcrest is close to 450, but not quite there. New York Elementary is quite small. Woodlawn Elementary, quite small. Sunset Hill, not quite 450. So looking at those buildings over time and from a facilities perspective, as our district grows, again, in the future, sometime, out past that 5-year, I'm sorry, please, no interruptions from the audience. Sometime out past that 5-year time horizon where we have those enrollment projections that show us still declining, once we do start to grow again, we will be poised, if we are thinking about it that way, we will be poised to manage enrollment growth if we are looking at how to enhance those assets, those physical assets, to address that enrollment growth with additional capacity at those smaller buildings. Does that make sense?
Kind of, so I'm just gonna ask for clarity. So,
Sure.
so it's essentially, it's like, know where your capacity limit is, based off of like 100%, but also give yourself wiggle room. So if we need to expand out further in several years, we have room to do that in that building. Is that?
Yes, and just in terms of, I know from the experience of being on the facilities committee and doing the bond planning, that, if we're projecting out that we are going to need additional classroom space at a building, next year, that's really probably not going to be able to build on a classroom in that time frame. So looking at all of this information, working with our partners and planning out as we move through this next few years, planning out what that looks like going forward. And I think that what that does is that it addresses the concern in some of those out years when you get out to 26, 27, 27, 28. We do have a couple buildings that look like they're filling up. We need to be thinking about how we plan for that in those out years.
I believe I understand. Thank you,
Okay.
Shannon.
All right.
Would you also, and just to piggyback on that question and that answer, would you anticipate as part of the yearly facilities master plan that's where that planning would take place, or would you anticipate it would be a completely separate process and not a line item?
I would want to rely on our facility staff to give direction on that, but I just, based on my experience and knowledge with the capital plan, I think you could look at it through that lens.
Okay.
And have it be a part of the capital planning process. We have a lot of other, as we all well know, we have a lot of other needs that are being met through that capital outlay fund. But we're doing some things like selling the Holcomb property. Perhaps there are opportunities to earmark funds in out years, through some things like that to address some of these needs that we see, not next year or the year after, but in future years, without exceeding our ability to pay for it through our capital outlay funds.
Okay. All right. Good question.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I have 21 items of notes from you. I appreciate that. I would also like to echo my thanks to the members of the Boundary Advisory Committee. They worked extremely hard and very, very focused each evening on staying on task and doing the work that was right in front of them. They self-monitored and they self-directed as a committee, and look forward to the future meetings with them. They did a tremendous job.
Thank you. We do have public comment related to this item, so at this time, I'd like to invite,
I'm sorry,
Kelly,
I just
yes.
have this is my clarifying question. First, I also want to just extend a huge thank you to the Boundary Committee, and then that you all are meeting again, back to back with short notice. I appreciate your taking the information we've gotten and seeing how you can incorporate it, what you come back with. So just, I know it's in the PowerPoint, but just for clarity, they'll meet on I think your last meeting is the 19th, and then we would vote on the boundaries so that families know, because as quickly as we can get this information to both principals, educators, and our families, that I'm recognizing this is very late in the school year, particularly for students, so that they know where they're going.
So I would say there's a couple different possibilities around that. If the Boundary Committee meets on the 12th and feels like they need to meet again on the 19th in order to follow up on this feedback, then I would expect that you would see a final vote, a final decision on it at the April 24th board meeting. If the Boundary Committee meets on the 12th and does not feel that they need that meeting on the 19th, then it could be the potential that we could have a specially called board meeting in order to take action on this. I would anticipate, because of the nature of this item, that I would, if I called a special meeting, I would notice public comment on this item as part of that meeting. Normally, you have to notice the public comment at a special meeting. We would do that for this to allow the public to come and give input before we take a final vote. So that would be, I think it really depends on how the meeting goes on the 12th and what feedback we get, board leadership gets in terms of where the committee is at.
That's really helpful. I'll say, as if they're able to, and it might be too much for them to do, but if they're able to and we could look at it, I would support an additional meeting if that would be helpful.
I appreciate knowing
to
that.
know.
Okay.
Sorry, stuck on my shirt here. This is Kay. I would agree with what Kelly would say. The other thing is, as board leadership is kind of looking at the public commentary, just continue to think about how you may want to structure that, because this is one of those items that probably has a lot of comments. So.
Appreciate that. Okay, we'll move to our public comment on this item. We have 6 individuals who've signed up, so our board clerk will provide you with the timer. I'd invite John Monahan to the podium for your public comment, and then Eve Bonner and Lee Bonner are the next 2 individuals. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Monahan. I'm the parent of a 5th grade Deerfield student and a resident of the Deerfield neighborhood. To the board, thank you for your work and for hearing me today. You are often asked to choose between the least horrible of horrible options, and I recognize that. To my fellow Lawrence citizens and neighbors at risk of losing their school or being forced to move to another, I see you and I hurt with you. I'm not here today to speak for myself or my own children, because we're not directly affected by the proposed changes. My student is moving to West Junior High and no longer will be attending Deerfield. Instead, I'm here today as a Deerfield resident to remind the board that in 2014, the then Boundary Advisory Committee made the same recommendation to move the Sunset Hill boundary into the Deerfield neighborhood to Trail Road. It's easy decision to make when looking at a color block map, because Trail is a nice straight road. But Trail Road does not divide the Deerfield neighborhood. Trail Road and the streets which originate from it are part of the Deerfield neighborhood. I'd say half or better of that small color block of the proposed change is actually 6th Street business frontage, where no students live. This suggestion doesn't move a large group of students. Instead, it alienates 20 kids from their neighborhood. In 2014, I stood here with a petition signed by myself and 115 of my neighbors, asking the board to reconsider this exact boundary recommendation. We asked the board to look at the actual streets and recognize that this boundary would deprive children of the opportunity to attend school with their neighbors, as well as depriving them of a safe route to school. We invited members of the board to come and drive the Deerfield neighborhood and observe just how safe and walkable it is. At least one board member obliged, and the board ultimately voted unanimously to preserve the Deerfield neighborhood and ensure its students had a safe, walkable route to school with their immediate neighbors. I'm here to ask you all to do the same thing today. For the last 8 years, my kids have walked a straight shot down Lawrence Avenue from Lindley Drive without crossing a single four-way stop, let alone 6th Street, one of the busiest streets in town during morning rush hour. My neighbors' children want the same thing. Many of them have expressed they want the same thing. I'm certainly not speaking for everybody, and I want that for them. I know that our district is facing much bigger and more complex changes today than they were 9 years ago, but this particular boundary change has been discussed before and is no less at odds with prioritizing the safety of our students today than it was then. Thank you all for your consideration. And thank you to the Boundary Advisory Committee as well. I know it is not an easy thing to do.
Thank you. Next is Eve Bonner, then Lee Bonner, then Jamie Reed. Is Eve here? No? Okay. Lee Bonner, are you here? Okay, we'll move to Jamie Reed.
Hello, my name is Jamie Reed. I live north of I-70 and west of the Kansas River. After listening to the board input, it does sound like you guys got our emails, and I appreciate you addressing our concerns, and thank you for those. Thank you for that. So the proposal boundary lines would move our neighborhood kids from Deerfield to Woodlawn. Currently, we live 1 mile away from Deerfield, but the move to Woodlawn would be 3 to 5 miles away, depending on the route. Under this proposal, we would pass by 3 neighborhoods that are closer to Woodlawn to get to our assigned school. And not anywhere else in this proposal are you jumping and crossing neighborhoods to utilize other schools. As I understand, incoming 4th and 5th graders and their siblings would get automatic approvals to stay at their school. So I surveyed our neighbors, my neighbors, and this approval would allow 24 out of the 30 kids to stay at Deerfield. My 2nd grade daughter does not fall into that. We moved to this neighborhood for the specific reason of being closer to friends and family that can be our village to support me as a single mother. Now we're losing it all. My support system gets to stay at Deerfield, and we're forced to go to Woodlawn. Well, I'm sure that Woodlawn is a great school with great teachers, students. Most families in this neighborhood chose to live here based on it being in this Deerfield School District, as it is the nearest school. So as the north of I-70, west of Kansas River representative, we're requesting it to be kept in the Deerfield District. We understand that boundaries can change at any time. However, no one could have predicted a boundary change so drastic it would have us go from Deerfield to Woodlawn. If you must change the neighborhood boundaries, please consider allowing all children to be grandfathered in and allowed to finish their elementary career, and not just the incoming 4th and 5th graders and their siblings. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Next is Andrew Surmeyer.
Good evening, and thank you for pronouncing that so well. Not many people get that right, so
Thank you.
I appreciate everybody on the board and the Boundary Advisory Committee. I know it's not easy. What you guys do is not easy. But I do want you to consider that area that both Ms. Jones, Mr. Gordon Ross, and Ms. Kimball have mentioned about north of I-70. Just keep that into the Deerfield District. It would just be way out of the way for those people, for those children to have to go almost 4 miles to a different elementary school while passing through another area. After listening to the comments and the suggestions that the doctor has given about different things, something kind of popped into my head. And have we looked at the possibility of having Michigan, from 6th and Michigan up to I-70, having possibly that area go over to Woodlawn, and the remaining Pinckney area then go to Hillcrest, then we're not looking at children crossing 6th Street, McDonald Drive. They have a passage, and we can add crossing guards for 6th Street to get those children from the Michigan over to McDonald Drive, north or south down to Hillcrest. It's just a suggestion, maybe something we can look at. I know that there's so many things to look at here, and I just appreciate you guys listening to the input and the advice. Me being a former police officer and a former accident reconstructionist, and knowing that there was another fatality on McDonald Drive just this morning, it scares me to death thinking about children crossing that road. It scares me to death. So please consider that. I know you guys have a very difficult decision. A lot of recommendations coming your way. But please listen to me. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last public comment is Melody Alexander.
So it technically hasn't been 2 full weeks because it was about midnight a couple weeks ago when the decision was made to close Pinckney. We had parents up here begging to protect the safety of our children, and unfortunately 4 members of this board, who now my son knows your names and faces, chose to close our most vulnerable schools. It's also been a couple weeks since Kelly Jones, you told us that you felt personally attacked by the pleas of our parents over their children crossing this road that's right out here in front of us. And yet it's been a handful of hours since a man was killed right in this very street that you are telling our children that they might have to cross. I personally lack faith in the promises of this administration. And I will tell you this, that this entire community is watching. I have heard myself the failed promises of Kennedy kids that the parents of these Kennedy families are dealing with, the lack of promises that have been kept. Do not do that to Pinckney. Do not do that to Broken Arrow. These have been failures that have been ongoing for the past several years. We continue to bleed students from this school district because of administrative decisions. We are likely looking to leave this district. Do the right thing for our children. I do hear, and I appreciate the fact that many of you are raising the concerns that you are about these districts or about the redistricting, but I need you guys to demand that this is taken care of. Please make sure the administration does the right thing, because I cannot have our children suffering because we make them cross this street.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment on this agenda item. Further board comments or questions? Paula and Carol, I want to check in with you again just to make sure if there's anything you want to add, just please jump in and let me know.
Yeah, this is Carol, and I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to make your comments, and we are reading our emails and getting back to them as soon as time allows. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have anything. Thanks, Shannon.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Thank you, Carol. Dr. Lewis or Dr. Engelbreg, are there anything you need clarification on from the board before we conclude our discussion this evening?
No, I think this conversation was very helpful for us in terms of taking some things back to our boundary committee. I also want to take a moment to thank Ron May and our first student team for beginning to address the students that would potentially cross McDonald by providing transportation for those students. But we will take this information that we received tonight and back to our boundary committee.
Okay. think that concludes our work on this particular agenda item. Then, Dr. Lewis, do you have any closing announcements for us this evening?
No?
Okay, then a motion to adjourn.
This is Kay. I motion that we adjourn.
This is Carol, I second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, we are adjourned.